Zavitz, parishioner at St. Joseph. Maybe you can't hear me. And she's agreed to give us a presentation tonight on adult caregivers of senior family members. We've been having a number of people ask us about providing something along these lines, and then we started this series of healthcare and spirituality lectures. So Mary is kind of like our trailblazer here with her first one. She's a social worker, retired, and has worked with a lot of different families and patients that have needed geriatric care. So she's going to give us our presentation tonight. It looks like she's very prepared to do so. She's going to begin with a prayer.
Yes, I want to start with a prayer. So we can all just fold our hands and we'll pray in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear God, we ask you to be with us tonight, to bless the fruits of this gathering, to guide us by your wisdom, to support us by your power, and bring us your peace and love, and guide this discussion tonight and help all those that are in need. In Jesus' holy name we pray. Amen. Amen. Well, as Father said, I'm from St. Joe's, but I'm very active here at St. Phil and also at St. Jerome, so I kind of do the tri-parish little trifecta. I want to start tonight about the caregiving mode. I want to talk and give you an introduction from one of our first ladies, our former first lady, and it was Rosalind Carter. And she made a statement one time that really caught my attention, and I think that it's appropriate for tonight. Rosalind said that there are 4 kinds of people in this world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregiving. And I think that pretty much sums up for all of us. At some point in our lives, we're going to be in one of those categories, if not all of them at some point in our lives. So I really liked that part to get us started tonight, to give you an idea about caregiving, how it affects all of us. I want to just kind of give you a little brief history on caregiving. You know, in past generations, it was very customary for people to usually have large families, to live close by one another. Families tended to stay in the same city, if not neighborhood, or by family members. And so through that, you know, you had people that were close usually that could help out if there was ever a need. And most women weren't, didn't work outside the home. And so there tended to be more people that would be able to take care of maybe an elderly or an infirmed person, or somebody that just needed maybe some temporary help at one point. But today, let's think about our world today. People have small families. Most women work outside the home. And caregiving does tend to fall to the women. It's just how it's kind of always been. But they have smaller families, and it's not uncommon at all to have people live all over the country, and sometimes even in another, country across the world. And so there's not that connection that we have anymore for immediate help and assistance if somebody needs some kind of caregiving or some even minor thing like that. So that is kind of, with this fast-paced world we live in, the caregiving has really changed. And sometimes, instead of just one person as a group taking care of that person, now it becomes one person taking care of one person, instead of having some kind of gathering of family, close friends, church, community, whatever, to help. So that's why I think caregiving has really changed. And I think that that's kind of helping us to feel a little bit more stress when we do have to be the caregiver. So that's just kind of a little bit of a history on how we're at caregiving nowadays. I started my career in caregiving as a child, which I didn't even realize until I looked back at my life. I realized that caregiving has been something that I have been doing almost my entire life. When I was really little, my family's all from the UP, and when I was really little, my paternal grandmother had a stroke long before I was born, and she lost the ability to speak, and she had some paralysis on the right side. Well, it was not uncommon for my father to get her and bring her down here and stay with us for about a month at a time, and this happened all during my really young childhood. And I didn't really understand that it was just what we did was Grandma came and stayed with us. But at that time, I realized I had been learning some valuable lessons about caretaking. You know, I learned that there was different ways to communicate with people. She couldn't talk. And so she was there with us for a month at a time. You learned how to communicate. Maybe it was non-verbally, but as a young child, I just learned that you could do that. And I watched my parents be very kind to her and very gentle, and I had to learn patience myself when I couldn't get her to understand something that I was trying to, communicate to her. And then with her, I also, my maternal grandmother, she moved in with us. She was the last of a very large Irish family, and she moved in with us when I was just getting ready to enter high school. And so now I had another opportunity to learn about caregiving up close and personal. She came and moved in with us, and she stayed with us. And through that part of caregiving, I had to watch my mom quit her job. She was a teacher at St. Joe's. My father, who was getting ready to retire, had to stop his retirement plans, and he went back to work. And then when other people were out doing fun things, I a lot of times was tapped to grandma sit, not babysit. I was grandma sitting, so that my parents could go out and do something, or if they had an activity or whatever. So yet again, caregiving kind of fell into my vision, and I learned some more things about how to, be a caretaker, even though I probably wasn't really thinking about that at the time. And then moving on from that, when she passed away, I was just finishing college, and my husband and I, we were planning on getting married, and after we graduated and thinking that we were going to move on to this new life, and then his dad had a stroke and a heart attack. And suddenly all those plans kind of went like this, and yet again we learned another thing. At a different stage in our lives, now we were just going to begin our lives, suddenly we become caretakers yet again. His mom, he got bad enough where he needed to go to a nursing facility, so that was our first real experience with that. And then she came and stayed with us, and then her parents, who were elderly in California, became ill, and she needed to leave and go take care of them, so we were taking care of my father-in-law. And during that time, we were applying for adoption for our children, and he was working at Kellogg, and we were going to be transferred, and yet again, another area in your life, caregiving. And this kind of is how the whole pattern went. My parents, we ended up having to take care of my father for a while, and then when he passed, then my mother became old enough that she was going to need care, and then she went into the realm of dementia, and that was a whole new ballgame for us because that was the first time that it happened. And so we had to learn how to navigate that whole world, and that lasted for about 10 years. And then just when we think we're done with all of this, my husband's mother, my mother-in-law, was in her 90s, and she had been caretaking all this time for her sister. She now became in need of caretaking. So as we're in our retirement years, we were then becoming caregivers once again. And that has been my life. I have always done something with caregiving. And my jobs brought me to caregiving. I worked at nursing homes, at extended care facilities. I helped start the hospice program here years ago when hospice was just a brand new thing. I just felt a calling, and I felt really committed to older individuals because I had, I guess, a lot of experience, and I never really realized that. So that was becoming part of who I am, and so that's why I really wanted to do something about caregiving and offer information and help, because I know personally how hard the road can be when you are the caregiver. So that's a little bit about who I am and how I got to be doing this. There's an organization, and there's organizations for everything. It's called the National Family Caregivers Association. It's the NFCA. You know, they have organizations for everything. They were trying to define for their organization what family caregiving was. And so they came up with this list of things that they considered caregiving. And as I read this list, I want you to think about if any of them resonate with you. So they said, caregiving is as diverse as the individual needing it. Caregiving is being a person's healthcare advocate. Caregiving is stressful work. Caregiving challenges people to go beyond their comfort zone. Caregiving forces individuals to deal with change. Caregiving is an endless search for balance. Caregiving is a strain on relationships. Caregiving can be a lonely world, but caregiving can have joyful and fulfilling moments. And as I read through that, I think that sums up a lot of caregiving. You know, it's not easy. It's not something that you're going to jump around saying, oh, I want to do that, I want to do that, you know, when it's, you know, it's usually, that's not the first job that anybody wants to do. And you know, in caregiving, there's usually around 4 stages when you're in the realm of caregiving. Usually it starts out something in stage 1 where it's just very minor. You might be helping a family member. It could be an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, a sibling, a spouse, a parent, even a close friend. You might just start helping them, maybe doing some minor tasks. It doesn't look like it's going to be anything long-term. You're thinking this is just because they need some help, and you might be noticing that maybe they aren't remembering medications or something, so you kind of slide into this, and that's usually the beginning. That's how caregiving starts. And you might not really notice it, but at some point during the early stage, somebody, and it might be you, has kind of stepped up to become the actual caregiver. So that the care receiver has this person that's advocating for them, and you've actually really started to become the caregiver. Does it make a difference? I think so, because as the true caregiver, you're going to start take on responsibilities that other people are not going to do, because you're going to feel more the need to do that as you are spending time with the care receiver. During this time, you're also going to be evaluating how things are. You know, what's your life like right now? What stage are you in? You know, I was caregiving as a child. I was caregiving as a teenager. I was caregiving at the stage when we were just getting married. I was caregiving when I was in that sandwich generation. I had young children, elderly parents. Because my parents were of the World War II generation. They were in their 40s when they had me. So they were older. So I was raising children and I was taking care of parents. So I was also in that. And then as we got to be older, we were caregiving again. And then retirement age, we're still caregiving. So at different stages, you might not have all of that, but you are going to slide into different, parts of that. And so as you're thinking about when you're getting started as a caregiver, those are the things that are going to start playing into you as to what stage are you at in your life. And then in the second part of caregiving, things are going to start moving along where perhaps the person's health starts to change, or maybe some cognitive issues start showing up, or even your own health maybe starts to change a little bit. And so this is kind of when you want to start maybe looking for some help or some suggestions of what else can I do, or the what if stage. What if this happens, or what if this might happen? Where you start thinking a little bit ahead, which means that just because you're the caregiver, you don't have all the answers, so you're going to need to start seeking out some resources or some help, or you're at least identifying in your mind, I might need some help down the road. And so that's stage 2. As things progress, stage 3 is what we call the heavy caring. This is where you're spending a lot more time worrying about the person that's receiving your care. You're spending a lot of time, maybe doctor's appointments have just increased tremendously. Or if a phone rings, you get that clench because is this a good call or a bad call? The heavy caring, it becomes day after day after day. This is when you get more tired. This is when the stress levels start to go up, and we are going to talk about caregiver stress and caregiver burnout because that's a real thing. As you get into the heavy caring, that's when you have to start making decisions also. How long can you do this? How much care are you going to need? As the person's health or your health changes dramatically, how much extra help am I going to need? Or what am I going to do if something happens, even to your own health? And during the heavy caring time, that's when people tend to start forgetting about their own health. And that's what we're going to talk about when I talk about stress here. The last stage of caregiving is when you have to come to acceptance of the way situations are. It's kind of the letting go period in caregiving that not everybody wants to face, but that's something that all of us eventually need to do. You need to think about how life is going to be different, maybe, what you're going to do, and just think about spending, quality time with your family and the people that you're caring for as you come to kind of some closures towards the end. And that's how caregiving goes. It starts out simple, and it can go on for years, but it kind of goes up, and it goes up, and it goes up. And then there's going to be an end game, and sometimes people can't handle the end game very well because that's all they've done. That's become their identity, is I am the caregiver. And when that no longer is part of your life, that becomes a real problem for a lot of people. And so that's something to think about too when you're in the caregiving phase of your life. So caregiver stress, it's a real thing. I mean, it could be listed as a number 1, number 2 disorder right now because so many people are in the throes of caregiving. It requires, caregiving requires a ton of emotional, physical, spiritual strength. And if you've ever done caregiving in any, form, you know that it can be very difficult. And you need a lot of strength and energy to do this, to do what you do. And all of that can cause stress on your body. And as you're doing your caretaking, and sometimes you tend to forget about yourself. Stress is a response that God gave us. He put the response, the fight or flight, into our bodies so that if a child was going to run out in the street, you were going to grab him. Or if you were going to spill a hot coffee, you would grab it. Or something that's going to make your adrenaline pump and you're going to react. But caregiving can also trigger that. Every time, a phone call might come from somebody that's maybe with whoever you're, caring for. Maybe you stepped out for an hour or two in a phone call and you see that and your stress ratchets up. Or maybe at night, when you think everything's fine, and then the person maybe makes a noise or calls out, and you just tense. And this continues on and on and on. And when that happens, it builds up in your body. And that can cause all sorts of problems. When you cannot release that stress, it becomes chronic. And chronic stress, it exacerbates health conditions. And it will weaken your immune system. It will make you vulnerable to other illnesses. It can cause headaches, high blood pressure, chronic fatigue, digestive disorders, sleep problems, and a whole other host of things. That's when you let stress keep building up. And if it's not addressed, it will lead to what is called caregiver burnout. And I've seen that, and it's not pretty. And caregiver burnout is a real thing that can take a person out really fast. So what is caregiver burnout? This is what happens when a caregiver focuses entirely on the care receiver, and they completely take themselves out of the equation. That means, like, maybe you're remembering to take them to the doctors, but when's the last time you went to the doctor? Or when's the last time you had an appointment that you were supposed to go to that you canceled and forgot to redo? When's the last time you took an hour for just yourself? When's the last time you got a really good night's sleep? When is the last time you got a treat for yourself? When is the last time you remembered to call somebody for a birthday? Or, all of that is signs that there's a problem because you're not taking care of yourself. Signs of burnout can seem mild at the beginning, and you won't even really notice them. But if left unchecked, again, the burnout can happen. So here's some signs of chronic stress that has become burnout. See if any of these seem familiar to you. Chronic fatigue, which means waking up exhausted and dreading the day ahead. Emotions that are all over the map. Anger, fear, frustration, tears that just show up and you don't know why. Drinking maybe really large amounts of caffeine because you just can't stay awake, or I just need to be awake, or what if something happens and I need to be awake? Or the other way, what if you're so wired you just need a glass of wine at night to unwind? Or maybe you need 2, maybe 3, Those are other signs, because you're starting to, what I'm almost calling self-medicating with food, maybe drinks, alcohol. How about avoiding your friends or not wanting to do the things that you used to love to do? And if you think that that doesn't happen, that does. When people call you and you're just too exhausted, or you don't know how am I ever going to do that? I can't do that. No, thank you. And you just keep putting people off and putting people off. And that's a really common problem. How about chronically poor sleep? Feelings of hopelessness and guilt, not taking care of yourself or not caring how you look. Feeling a lack of happiness or joy and thinking that it's normal. You get to a point sometimes where you just are going along and you're thinking, well, that's normal. And you've forgotten how it feels to be happy, joyful, and energetic. Poor concentration, brain fog, just forgetful due to brain overload. That's a big one. That was a big one for me. So what do you do? All right, if you're starting to say, oh, I recognize some of these. This is me. Oh my gosh, what do I do? Some of the things that you need to do are for yourself, and some are for your care receiver. But all of it together is to help you through the real heavy lifting of caregiving. There's a Caregiver Action Network, and they have a few suggestions too. The first one is seeking support from other caregivers, and that's kind of like what we're interested in tonight. Is Father and I have been talking about perhaps there might be enough interest in starting maybe a monthly caregiver support group here at church. We want you to be able to reach out to people that are also going through what you're going through. And that's a way to help release some of the stress that you might be feeling. The second one is to take care of yourself. And that's kind of what we talked about. Make sure that you're getting your own appointments done. Make sure that you're doing something nice for yourself. One of the things that I have, and this is just it's more of a visual, but this is called a self-care toolkit. And there's a sheet over there to give you ideas. What do you do with a self-care toolkit? Okay, self-care is really important. So my self-care toolkit, usually I have something like this when I was taking care of my mom or my father, and even now when I help friends out that are going through maybe chemotherapy or something and I'm driving them, I have a bag that I have that I keep stuff in so that I'm always there with things that make me happy and things that will provide for my needs. And so like in my self-care toolbox, I have my iPad, I keep that with me. I have a prayer journal so that I can write down things and then I can pray about them while I'm sitting there. I have a book of just some things that are uplifting thoughts for every day, something positive. You can keep snacks that are good for you. I'm a gluten-free person. I always have food with me because half the time I can never have any of the food. But you can put in things that are joyful, things that make you happy. When I was going through one of my health crises, a friend of mine gave me this, and it says on here, find joy in each day. And in it was a adult, like a coloring book with pictures, really neat designs, and pencils. And I have kept this all these years because every time I see it, it reminds me of being joyful. And it reminds me that you have to do some things for yourself. So you can have things like that at hand. If you crochet or knit, or you like to do Sudoku or crossword puzzles or anything like that, throw something like that in your bag. You know, and then you just can, like chocolate. I love chocolate. I would never go anywhere without chocolate, so I keep chocolate. And then, you know, I throw some tea in my bag, and my favorite essential oil smell is lavender. So I have little pouches all over my house of lavender, and I keep it in my car too for on those angry days when we're driving and, you know, maybe somebody cut you off and I can just sniff my lavender. Yeah. So this is just an example of stuff that you can do. Put it in a bag, keep it so that if you get called out, if you have to go to a hospital or to a doctor's appointment, it's going to be long, or if you're sitting there at night with the person that you're caregiving for, you'll have just some things that are good for you. So that's kind of self-care. And you can do your own little self-care toolkit. Accept offers of help, and I even put some sheets out on the resource page, section over there. Accept help. If people say to you, you know, I wish I could do something, what could I do? Have a list. And there's a sheet over there that literally has a list where you can put down, like, would you like to do, you know, go to the store for me, and, you know, you could get me this and this and this, I need this. Or, you know, I haven't had pizza in forever, you know, how about if I gave, you know, would you go and get me a pizza? Or if they want to help, could they sit? Could you have them sit with your care receiver for half an hour just so you can take a nap or go for a walk? When people offer help, accept it. That's really hard for a lot of people. You know, they don't want to have other people, they don't want to feel like they're beholden to people. Oh my gosh, I don't want to be a burden to you. People really do want help. And even people far away, you know, if somebody in the family wants to help, I'll give them a list. Tell them, you know, get me a DoorDash gift card. I'll call up food and have it delivered. You know, or whatever. Just something. Accept the help, because people really do want to do it. Communicate effectively with healthcare people, for yourself and for your care receiver. Make sure that you keep track of health, keep track of their medical papers, keep track of your own stuff. Keep a checklist, you know, so that you can be on top of that. You'll feel better when you know that you're on top of things. And then take respite breaks. You know, that's just like going to your friends and go have coffee. You can do it. Let somebody sit with mom, dad, or whoever, and go out for half an hour. You need to take respite breaks. And there are resources available for longer respites. A day of respite, an overnight, so that you could go to somebody's wedding maybe. There are resources, and I have a whole lot of hands out there that are going to give you some local resources, but you do need that respite. And the final thing, and Father taught me this one, when you do something good, okay, endorse yourself, congratulate yourself, be kind to yourself and say, wow, I really did a good job today. Or you know what, I didn't think I was going to get through that very long appointment with them. Or this was just going to be a really hard day. Look what I did. You know, caregiving is a really hard thing. Endorse yourself. Say thank you. Good job. Because we don't hear that very often. And when you're in a caregiving situation, it seems like there's so much negative going on all the time. It's nice to be able to tell you that you've done a good job, even if it's yourself. The resources that I have over on the table, there are a lot of resources. And resources can be as simple as a book. And there's a lot of books that I have here. Some are just ones that I have, like Wisdom of the Saints, you know, something positive. You know, find and fill your head with positive things. There's a lot of books. There's a group, it's a national organization that's been started by 2 women. It's Catholic. It's a support group for caregivers. It's called Nourish, and I am looking into this program. It's an amazing group, and they have online resources for everyone that's caregiving. And they also have this, it's called the Caregivers Companion, and it gives you just so many uplifting things to fill your head with. There's a lot of books that are out there, you know, big ones like this. This is one of my older ones that I've had, Caring for an Aging Loved One. And this is from Focus on the Family. So it is Christian-based. In fact, most of my things are Christian-based. Even the government has freebies that you can get, and that's what this is. This is the Caregiver's Handbook. This is from the National Institute on Aging. I did list for you in some of the handouts I have over there some of the organizations that we have in the community. And I don't know if you are aware, but we even have like an Alzheimer's Association in Calhoun County that meets monthly. There's organizations like that. There's organizations for almost every disorder and disease, and I have a whole list of those. But there's a lot of organizations in the community, like Carewell Services, there's the PACE program, there's Home for You, there is the Bronson program. There are a whole lot of organizations that are geared to helping caregivers. There are counseling services just geared for a caregiver. There are support groups that are online and in person here in the area. And there is a lot of online resources. You know, you need to, I don't care if we're all older, we need to embrace technology, okay? I've had so many people tell me, oh, I don't know how to do that, I can't do that. I wish when I was in the throes of caregiving that I had the online resources that are available today. So get a grandchild, get somebody, anybody younger than us knows how to do this kind of stuff. You know, you can set up Zoom meetings with family members all over the, you know, the country, so you can stay connected. You can reach out to these organizations that have online support groups. The Nourish program does a monthly, just a coffee, where you get on and everybody's drinking coffee, and they share uplifting stories, they share their faith, they share about God, they give us hope. You know, and sure, it's online, but you know what? You get to know these people. It's okay. You can reach out and learn how to do technology. The resources that are here can go anywhere from just somebody that can come in maybe a couple hours a day to somebody that is going to come in and stay all day. There's adult foster care facilities in our area. We have extended care facilities now. Everything is so much different than when I was first working at nursing facilities. They have so much more to offer today. The Calhoun Med facility, they have the Marion Birch daycare center that you can apply to and have a person go there. The PACE program, which is here downtown at the Cool Center, they have centers. My mother-in-law attended a PACE program in Florida where they go to the center and they have activities and they have health checkups and they have their doctors and they get their fingers and toes checked and they get nail polish and meals, and that we do have that. So there are organizations out there. And then there's your church. You know, embrace your faith community, because the one thing that you don't do, you need to always rely on God. Rely on your faith and don't let that go astray, because He's going to see you through. He promised us, I will never leave you. He promised us that. And you have to remember that on those darkest days, He's got you. And I know there are so many days when you don't think that that's happening, or you're thinking, my prayers aren't being answered, or I just don't think I can do one more day like this. He's got you. So I want you to also remember, as a faith community, you know, we're here also. We're all together in this. You know, this is our faith community. And you can embrace that too. So that's another resource. So I guess in the end, I want to leave this open to some questions if you have any. But I want you to remember that caregiving will be probably one of the hardest things you've ever done. Care receiving will be the worst thing you've ever done, because nobody wants to be that way. You know, I can remember my own mom looking up at me one day in a very lucid moment and saying to me, I never wanted to be a burden. You know, I mean, care receiving is difficult. You know, so as a caregiver, you can have those moments too where you remember they also are a person, you know, and maybe your roles have changed. Maybe you're the spouse now that has to do the stuff that the other one used to do. If you're caregiving for a parent, roles reverse, you know, and that's really hard. You know, the parent that took care of you, now you're taking care of them. And so it's hard. But caregiving will be probably one of the hardest things you ever do. But I hope that through some of the resources I have it set up so that there are community resources, there is self-care information, and then there are home management things that are just simply a few things for like medications and appointments. And then on the very by where the pencils are is a survey. And if you want to fill it out and just leave it on a table here, it's simply to find out, are you interested in having maybe a monthly support group meeting? And, you know, how do you want that to look? We're just kind of exploring that to see if there is a need, if there is a desire, how would you like that to play out? And there's some, you know, you can put all that on there and write whatever you would like about it to see if that would be feasible. And then we'll get, you know, we'll kind of see where we're going with this. But, you know, I don't want people to think about doing this alone. You need to reach out. So let me open this up and see if anybody has any questions.
We'll talk about the fallacy of making promises that you can't keep.
Okay, my husband made a good point, because I did this. You cannot make promises that you cannot keep. And what does that mean? That means when somebody, you know, says to you, I don't ever want to go to a nursing facility, please promise me you will never do fill in the blank. Okay? What that does, and you know, if you're Catholic, Guilt plays a big role in your life. And the guilt that can build up in you if you cannot keep that promise that you said, yes, Mom, I will never do that. And then their health deteriorates so badly that you cannot keep them at home any longer for their own safety and for your health. Don't make a promise that you will not be able to keep, because then that's going to eat at you if you have to break that promise. It will make you very upset and stressed. So that's a good point. Thank you for pointing that out.
Could you go over how hospice works and the kind of mechanics behind it?
Hospice is, I haven't been a part of the new hospice. When I started, it was very brand new. But hospice, my mother, when she was in her end stages, we engaged hospice for her. We also engaged hospice for my father. Hospice comes in and takes over. They have nurses. They have a medical director who kind of goes over all the medical of that person. They have nurses. Their goal is to keep somebody usually at home, but not always. They do have inpatient hospices where a person can go, sometimes for respite, just like an overnight, to give the family some breaks. But their goal is to keep them at home, keep them comfortable, okay? It's the palliative kind of care, medications to keep pain levels down, to keep them more comfortable, and keep them in a surrounding that they are familiar with or that they are comfortable with. And they usually can provide aides that will come in and help with daily living, like baths and maybe do hair, or they can do some housekeeping or some meal preparations. Their whole goal is to try and just keep the person where they want to be. And when it first started, you had to have kind of a time span of maybe 6 months or less that the person was pretty much towards the end of their life. And so hospice would come in and then help them through those. And then they have support, they have grief support, they have volunteers.
I think when the doctor declares somebody eligible for hospice, that brings with it some reimbursements for things from their insurance,
Yes.
through Medicare and stuff like that too.
And that's-
I'm not an expert on it.
And that
I
was
know
different. That now, it
I
was.
know that you then qualify for certain
Right.
services.
Yes.
so-
My friend, the doctor, just suggested that she get hospice about a couple weeks ago. And it's just starting up, and Medicare is
Yes.
paying for it.
Yeah, I thought that it was now. When we first started, it was all private pay. When hospice first began, and I'm talking about in the 80s, okay? Because that's when hospice really started. But yes, now, and even things like the PACE program that's here in town, those are all through like Medicaid and Medicare. So there's a lot of things that insurance can help with now that they never used to have. So those are the kind of resources that we can follow up on. One of the thoughts I had is if we did a monthly support group, we would bring in somebody like from hospice, or bring in somebody from maybe an adult foster care home. Bring in some of these resources and the people so that they could share their expertise.
Is it different ones, different hospices, or?
Oh, yes, yeah.
How do you know which one to get?
Well, for like us, you would, if you're living in Battle Creek, you would use the Southwest Michigan Hospice. Up in Grand Rapids, I think they have a Christian Hospice Association up there. It would be your logo.
Aren't there instances where you don't stay at home, you can't stay at home, or get
Yes,
moved to someplace?
my mother was moved to a adult foster care home in the last 3 months of her life, and we also had hospice. They went to the adult foster care home, and checked on her every few days. They made sure her medications were being given correctly. They monitored all of that. They provided support for me. And that was at an adult foster care home.
Does the hospital kind of put you in touch with these people, or is it?
They certainly can, yes.
I mean,
The social worker through the
toward
hospital.
the end of life, and, they
Yes.
say it's time to do something, either bring them home.
Yes.
Or take them someplace.
Yes, it's just that not everybody is open to hearing that.
Yeah.
And so usually
I'm
the
not open to it.
usually the social worker will, if you're in the hospital, usually the social worker would contact you and would bring that up as an option, because if you said to them, I don't know if I can do this, I'm gonna need help, that's all they need to hear, and they will give you a list of things that you can do.
The hospice that we had at the VA, any veteran qualifies. You don't have to have any service connection, you don't have to have any disability rating, nothing like that. Anybody that served in the U.S. military is eligible for VA hospice care, both inpatient as well as in the home. So, if you've got any veteran background, that's an important
That is a big one.
consideration resource.
How do
Kind of
you,
care is excellent, it's excellent care.
so how do you know when you're asking for hospice, what stage
I
or
don't know
what
about reserves.
organization of hospice you're getting?
Well, I mean,
Like
if
you
you
said, VA
serve
or
actively,
you're at
that's
a nursing home, nursing home.
You would apply to them. It's so, hospice is separate from where the adult foster care home was like taking her to an extended care facility. And then she was nearing the end of life, which we knew, I'm a social worker, I knew she was ending. And so I used to work for hospice, I knew the hospice people, I contacted them. And they send out somebody to come, and they do it like a little intake, and they said, yes, absolutely, we can come in, we can help out, we'll take over managing her meds, you won't have to worry about that, we'll check on her. This place was wonderful, I'd never really worried about that, but they would come in and check, and they would send, like if I felt like she needed some kind of assistance, they would send somebody out, but they would bring nutritional things for her too, like
Well, what I'm asking though is, like Father said, if you're associated with the military, they will arrange hospice for you. And I had a friend who was involved with one hospice organization, and to get her out of the hospital, they couldn't get a hold of this hospital or this hospice organization, so they called this other one for her.
Was that in a different community?
No,
Was
it
that here?
in Battle Creek.
Okay.
And it was night and day, and
Yeah. Was there a doctor involved that told them, or was this a discharge planner that had that information?
yeah, they wanted to get her out of the hospital back into a nursing home. And the original hospice that was taking care of whatever and getting a nursing home, they couldn't get a hold of those people, so they called this other hospice group. I was in the impression hospice was hospice.
Well,
But
hospice,
obviously it's not.
the services of hospice are pretty general, across the board. But there are individual hospices, because like Father's saying, there is a one at the VA. In our area, there is our hospice, and there might be the one out of Kalamazoo, because that's a separate one.
And that's where my friend ended
Yeah.
up, was in Kalamazoo, and was not good.
So, yeah, there are, used to be that there was one hospice in this whole area,
Well, that's what I thought.
and we
hospice
covered
was-
a large area, but now there are hospices that are set up, most communities have them. And so I guess if they couldn't get one into, like, the Battle Creek one, they might contact the Kalamazoo. Berry County has one also, it's up at Thornapple.
Is there a cost involved with hospice?
Usually nowadays, it's covered through your Medicare or Medicaid. And that, but I'm not, pardon?
You say usually?
I'm not 100% sure exactly how all of it is covered anymore. When my mom used it, her Medicare paid for that. And that was probably about 15 years ago. But we could get that information. I'm not positive on that.
And that's the kind of benefit that a group of people
Correct.
that are doing caregiving can share their resources.
Yes,
in terms
exactly.
of- and the knowledge that they have with all of those questions. And that's a good thing, because somebody may hear of another resource that
Yes.
the rest of the group doesn't have any information on.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the benefits of regularly meeting, and when you've got the caregiving going on, so that you get a better understanding of what is available, and costs and stuff like that, and that is a big factor, Each family situation is gonna be different as far as a lot of this cost stuff. I know families that have had to consult lawyers to find out what they're eligible for and what they're not, and what it's gonna cost them as far as their savings, as far as, like inpatient care. One of the things that when I was working with hospice and doing, I kind of headed up the grief follow-up work, where we followed up with families for a year after. And the thing I was constantly dealing with was widows. Most of them were, most veterans would be male, although we had female hospice patients as well. And one of the things I run into is that caregiver burnout stuff, and wives feeling terrible about themselves because they had to admit their husbands to the facility. The thing I have to oftentimes do is help them try to let go of that guilt. And one of the things I'd be able to say to them is, you were one person taking care of a person that was probably twice your weight or 3 times your weight. And when you admit them to the facility, around the clock, they're seeing like 24 different caregivers that's sharing that load and helping these people to get everything from recreational, physical therapy, to the spiritual care, which is part of every custodial care. Now with the JCO standards and stuff, hospital care standards, you have to make available the spiritual care of the patient as part of it. So, and a lot of people feel tremendous guilt turning over the care to somebody else, and that's unfortunate. And another thing that we run into, which is unfortunate, is abusive patients, and patients that have a high demand on their caregivers, and the caregivers feel like they have to meet every need, and then you get into all those dynamics of family isolation, which often happens when there's an abusive environment, and that can really, really accelerate that burnout.
Yes.
And I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen so much caregiver burnout where people are, like you say, ignoring their own physical care and spiritual care, psychological care, social care, and all of that type of stuff. Just goes downhill, and you can see the damage that it's doing to them, their bodies, their minds, everything. So it is a heavy-duty thing that can happen there, especially when you get into isolation, family isolation.
You're right, Bill, absolutely. That would be a good thing in your toolbox.
Yeah.
That's very good. Anybody else have any comments or questions or concerns? Okay, well, yeah, so if you're interested at all in maybe starting or being part of a group, I don't know what that would look like yet. There is the survey, and it's where those pens are over there. If you're interested, please just fill that out, and we will get in touch. I'm gonna be talking to Father, and we'll see, if there's any other input that people have, but, I'd be happy, if we wanted to start a group, if that would be helpful, so. Cause then, I can only touch on just a surface of stuff about caregiving. In a monthly meeting, you can start to bring in experts on other areas. And you can spend time sharing, sometimes just sharing your journey helps other people. Just sharing how you're feeling. Sometimes you just need somebody to listen to you and you're not even looking for anything. So just fill it out and you can leave it up here on the table. And if you have any other questions about any of the paperwork, any of the handouts I have, take what you think you might want. There's plenty of them, and hopefully you got something out of this